I want you to dress like a sophisticated tart. Sometimes when I'm testing my audio, I like to test it by reciting Jordy Griep lyrics. And then my girlfriend, she might be eavesdropping, and she's like, why are you, one, cheating on me, and why do you have all these weird psychosexual problems? Well, that's a whole separate conversation for another day. Another time as an intensity. What's up, guys? I've missed you. Another Kill Rationalism. I know I released one last week, but I feel like I've slightly... shirked my anti-rationalist duties to you guys. So we're going to be doing a video today about mythology, why mythology is awesome, why mythology can shape, transform, and improve your life, why it should be respected on its own terms, why it should be understood on its own terms, and why you should never, ever, 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 ever take an exclusively rational approach to mythology, whether in the terms of being skeptical of the phenomenon outright, or these really shallow rationalist interpretations. Like take the Grim Reaper, for example, right? When he has the Sith. Well, you could think, okay, well, if you use a Sith to cut down crops, well, these crops could grow grain. You know, like they're necessary for sustenance. They are necessary sustenance to continue life and create life. So he's the Grim Reaper because he's removing the food that acts as a sustenance to us. And of course, that's symbolic. It's not bad. It's okay, but it's the sickle of the moon. It's far deeper than you could possibly, and you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's the point. It goes way, way deeper than that. These are very shallow rationalist takes. Now, today we're going to be reading one of my Substack articles. I have to say I'm relatively proud of this one. I don't know how long this is going to be. I'm probably not going to add a ton of commentary because it's one of those essays that I think is relatively comprehensive. Unfortunately, I think we're going to, because it's comprehensive, we might be getting it slightly repetitive. I apologize, guys, but you have to understand, when I write articles, I have to try to find a balance between kind of feeding you guys. And so if I say something like, you know, if I know you watch my Jean Gebser series and I say something like, oh, that's just magic structure, that's just mythical, so you're going to know exactly what that means, right? But if you're new, you have no idea what I'm talking about, so I kind of have to explain. So unfortunately, there's a little bit of repetitiveness. I apologize. But I say, without further ado, let's get right into it. So this article is called Why Mythology Can Improve Your Life. The subtitle is, in some ways, Zeus is more real than any scientific claims. True, based. And I will leave, of course, a link to the article down below. So without further ado, I should have grabbed a water, but I didn't. Let's do it. All right. To contemporary man, and particularly rationalist atheists, mythology amounts to little more than fanciful stories that prove that we Homo sapiens cannot face reality unmediated by irrational nonsense. At best, mythology is material that fuels creative pursuits and, at worst, is an astoundingly inaccurate history of the world, so much so that its existence cannot help but be interpreted as narratives designed by malicious actors to control the masses by exploiting their irrationality and ignorance. By the way, keep your eyes open for Seeing the World Integrally video. I don't know when, probably in the coming week. I compared Gebser and Foucault in one of my articles, and I despise Foucault. I think it'll be a fun video. All right, continuing with the article. Even today, Christians argue the existence of God through logical thought. Looking your way, Trent Horn, I like you, I respect you. You need to stop doing this. Looking your way, Andrew Wilson, I somewhat like you, even though you're kind of a dick. I somewhat respect you, even though you're just a rationalist. To be clear, not only will you never be able to understand or come to knowledge of the existence of God through rational thought, because God is immeasurable, and of course rationality is limited to the measurable, and consciously known, God is mostly consciously unknown. He's essentially a giant mystery that you've reduced down to a concept, and then you're pretending that which can be reduced to a concept is the entire thing. That's bullshit. Stop doing this. There's another reason, okay? And Kant helped me understand this. John David Eber helped me understand this. There's truth of reason, right? So a truth of reason is when the predicate is contained within the subject almost. So if I say the airplane has wings or the bachelor is married, you're essentially engaging in tautology, which is say you're repeating yourself. Like, of course the bachelor is unmarried. Inherent in the definition of bachelor, the predicate is unmarried, is presupposed in the subject, the bachelor. That's a truth of reason. They're very important in logic. They're very important in math, particularly analytical stuff. And then we have truths of contingency. So if I say Barack Obama is 10 feet tall and 900 pounds, well, The bachelor being unmarried, that's something I can close my eyes and go, yeah, that makes sense. The part's less than the whole, and the whole's greater than the part. Yeah, that's the truth of reason. We can close your eyes. But that other claim I made about Obama, that's I can't close my eyes and do that. I have to go out here and check, right? That's called a truth of contingency. God falls into the latter category. So anytime some Christian comes up to you and he goes, this logical proof proves that God exists, he is, not only is he failing by employing rational thought, he's failing by employing terrible rational thought, because apparently he doesn't understand the difference between truth of reason and truth of contingency. I don't know what to tell you. Employing a truth of reason when God is a matter of contingency, you're just never going to get there. I don't know. It's like me saying Obama's 9 feet tall and 900 pounds, and I did that because I did some logical proof in my head. I didn't actually check out in the world. It's ridiculous. Even today, Christians argue the existence of God through logical thought, seemingly unaware of the true nature of the mythology that created their religion. And if you want to read more about this phenomenon, click here. I have another article about that on Substack if you guys are interested. Alas, and it may be hard to believe this, but the creators and orators of grand mythologies, in which gods like Zeus, Hades, and Apollo live and act, were not just so idiotic by nature that they inevitably warrant comparisons to simple Jack. They were not trying to come to an accurate, empirical understanding of the external world, nor were they trying to come to know any external truth. Oh, interesting. They were coming to a history of sorts. Remember, history defined as attributing sense to the senseless. I should have mentioned that in my article. They were coming to a history of sorts, but not of the external world. Mythology is a history of the internal, the soul, or, more accurately, how the external affects the internal. This is very important, this next paragraph, all right? Pay close attention to this next paragraph. I'm about to define mythology. All right. Mythology is an imagistic representation of how numinous experiences affect the soul. It is the shaping and crafting of images to touch the soul and carry the human spirit forward. It is the pictorial representation of the intangible forces that constitute the external and internal world. That is what mythology is, that little three-pronged definition. If you need to repeat or go back 10 seconds, fine. It's very, very, very important. And we're going to get into numinous experiences, so don't worry. As famed mythology professor and educator Joseph Campbell once said, quote, mythology is psychology misread as biography, unquote. I'm going to repeat this for emphasis because that little three-pronged definition I gave can be subsumed into this one pithy little line. Mythology is psychology misread as biography. Very simple. Psychology is internal. Biography is an accounting of external events. So it's a fundamental misunderstanding. Some of these atheist guys, it's bad because they got me defending Jordan Peterson. I don't even like Jordan Peterson that much. I just think he's right when it comes to mythology, but apparently he's too ignorant to just express it clearly. Myths are both constituted by and impose symbol, meaning, and narrative. The realm of imagination is where it operates and derives from. Think, I've got the picture. That's where that comes from myth. Oh, I've got the picture of what you're saying. That's mythical structure. And any form of imagistic communication or art is a product of mythology. Mythology is designed to illuminate life in its polaristic, all-encompassing whole. So that is what mythology is designed to do. It is designed to illuminate life, more particularly how external experiences that are overwhelming impact your soul, how they evoke certain emotions, maybe fear, joy, pain, and how they interplay with each other. Also, why is it that every imagistic form of communication or art is a product of myth? Well, as I just said, they both derive from the same place. Imagination, imagistic, there you go. But beyond the more commonly known and associated forms and understandings of mythology, there is a lesser-known element too, that of polar complementarity. We'll be getting into that. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Polar complementarity progressed, as in movement from the point of origin and not incremental improvement. That's what I mean by progress, movement from origin, not just sort of Darwinian, everything gets better over time. Polar complementarity progressed from a preceding way of relating objects to each other. This substratum is what Jean Gebser and I would call the magical consciousness structure. To keep it short, I apologize if you follow my Gebser series. Just kind of bear with me. Again, I have to find this sort of balance. I know. I apologize. To keep it short, in a manner completely antithetical to the rational propensity for division and separation, everything, literally everything, I don't use that word lightly, was unified. There existed no parts and wholes, ups and downs, internal and external. This view naturally implemented a mindset, if you want to call it that, of pars pro toto and toto pro pars, or part for the whole and whole for the part. Sorry, I don't know what's up with my... All right, and not only that, but the unified whole emanated magical forces, and it was the job of man at the time to unify himself with said forces so as not to be overpowered by them. This is the birth of all ritual, rite, and power drive in us Homo sapiens. So, of course, this is magic structure stuff. We talked about the example that Gebser gives with the pygmy tribes, and how what they did before they hunted antelope, it was a group of pygmy hunters, and they were all quiet, silent, gathered together doing a ritual, right? So what they did was they drew the outline of the antelope on the ground, and the second the first sun ray hit the antelope, it hit it on the neck. They threw an arrow right where the sunlight hit the antelope on the neck. They then go out and kill an antelope. When they bring it back, the antelope has an arrow in the neck, right where it was positioned in the ritual. Now, the rational interpretation of this would be that they, in their way of doing things, believe that the ritual caused the ensuing killing. Causality doesn't come out until rational thought. It's got nothing to do with causality. It has everything to do with unification. And you can tell it has to do with unification and not causality because they did not consider themselves to be the murderers of the antelope. It was the sun that murdered the antelope. And their way of throwing the arrow in connection with the sun is a way of unifying themselves with the magical unified whole that has its own agency, and it is the job of them to unify with that through ritual and rite so as to be granted spiritual permission to do something in the world. Remember, everything is unified and everything emanates magical forces. This little check here, this mouse pad, this highlighter, it's all one and it's all magical. So if I kill the antelope without the proper ritual, well, guess what? In 2 days, when a storm comes or when another tribe comes and kills half our tribe, you are going to be blamed for that because you did not unify yourself, my friend. It is a disunity, and you are being punished for disunity. This is why when, modern day people, contemporary people, they go to these, contemporary primitive tribes. I remember one guy talk, I think it was on Rogan's podcast, and he said that a guy got killed by a tribesman. Let's say it's a pygmy. It wasn't a pygmy, but for our example, he was killed by a pygmy. And when he watched what happened, he saw that the fellow tribesmen were very angry with him because he did something, and they thought it was going to be retaliation. Not retaliation in a causal sense, in the sense of that's the natural response from rational people, or even non-rational people, when people who they love are killed. That's not what they meant. They meant a spiritual unification. This is also cargo cults. Cargo cults is exactly this. When, if I'm on an island and I'm doing all this magical stuff, and the white man, if you'll excuse me, flies a plane and drops cargo, that's not a white man flying plane dropping cargo. That's a god. That's something magical happening. So what they do is they create these little cargo, or they get these little sticks and they create planes, and they do their ritual. And they think, now that I've unified myself with the magical powers, I've been granted permission, more planes will come and drop the cargo. Of course, that doesn't happen. Everything's magical, everything's unified. Xerxes had the river flogged for because the river wouldn't let him and his troops pass. Think about that for a second. There you go. What's important to note is that the magic structure was fueled by our vital aspects: instinct, emotion, and visceral feeling. These were all we needed to maintain our tribe's dominance and harmony, and all we needed to release ourselves from the magical determinism that is the unified world. This way of relating objects in the world to each other can be reasonably labeled one-dimensional, representing point-like unity. It's point-like. My highlighter, my phone, my mouse, They're all points that are connected through a vital nexus rather than a causal one. Each point is exactly that, a point, and they're all the same. So it's one-dimensional. It's just the point. Think of it like the atom. The atom is just one point, and yet everything comes out of it. When the atom is split, it's like, whoa, okay. So that one very tiny point contains within it the seeds of a magical world. Another important aspect of the magic structure is the numinous experience. It is important as it is the experience that underlies the creation of all religions. Maybe you shouldn't, Justin, maybe you shouldn't describe this experience as important twice in two sentences. Probably not a good idea. A numinous experience is exactly that. An experience, you can understand it mentally, but it is not a purely mental concept. It is experiential. It's like me coming in and pushing you, in which whatever you behold is so powerful or other that it overwhelms and short-circuits your rational faculties, leading the beholder to psychologically attribute a spiritual power, mana, not to be confused with manas. That's another Indian spiritual thing that's entirely separate. Mana. Mana is a power that upscales the ability of whatever it sort of touches to spiritual power. So to psychologically attribute a spiritual power, mana, to the object so that it upscales the abilities of whatever it touches. Think Piggy in The Lord of the Flies. He and his friends ritualize a conch because they cannot wrap their minds around what it is or how it got there. Think about Western anthropologists who traveled to Timbuktu to study contemporary primitive Africans, say, who exist almost exclusively in the magic structure. So you can still see the magic structure today. Unfortunately, it's deficient, though, so you're not going to see anything good come from it. They go, the anthropologists, that is, they go, study their subjects, accidentally leave a Sprite bottle, and alas, when they return 10 years later, the tribe is worshiping the holy object that is the Sprite can. Talk about good advertising. We can even recognize this phenomena today when observing children's reactions to intense thunderstorms. So, a child obviously doesn't know what a thunderstorm is. It's this very overwhelming, powerful event. So, of course, it's not just a storm, a natural phenomenon, knowable and explainable by science, as we adults know. But no, it's like a scary thing, and it causes him to cry. A fictional example, however, may bring this phenomenon to life. Think about Voldemort in the Harry Potter films. The evil committed by Voldemort so overwhelms the students of Hogwarts that they cannot even speak his name on account of preventing the tripping up of evil, magical forces. Our no-nosed friend has been attributed with such an intense mana that even uttering his name is bound to manifest the real person. I put a parentheses question mark. I don't know if you would consider Voldemort, a person, but is bound to manifest the real person into existence. Hello, collapse of rational division into pre-rational magical unification, my friend. So what's happening is even the utterance, there's a distinction between merely uttering a man's name and the man's existence itself. Remember, magical is about unity and it's pre-rational. So even the utterance of the name is equal to the person itself. It's kind of an idea of it. This is the source of all taboo and superstition, if it wasn't obvious enough. The potency of mana imparted to the object in question is, if you haven't already noticed, extracted as soon as one attains rational knowledge of the object. When the child truly understands that the storm is a natural phenomenon rendered knowable by our rational faculties, it no longer becomes a magical, mythical event destined to frighten us, thus extracting the fright evoked in the child who beholds the storm. Professor McGonagall, after finally realizing that Voldemort, though evil and deadly, is still bound to the laws of their world, confidently speaks his name, but only after she posits impenetrable logic. Quote, "And his name is Voldemort," she says. "Phileas, you might as well use it. He's come to try and kill you either way." So, in the same way that the storm is no longer a magical event because its mana has been extracted by rational knowledge and logic, the mana of Voldemort has been extracted by Professor McGonagall by positing impenetrable logic. It is logic that extracts and negates the numinous experience. Beautifully said. And the cool thing is, I don't think J.K. Rowling realizes what... you think J.K. Rowling's read Gebser? I'm not saying she's not intelligent or anything, but he's very obscure. But, as Gebser outlined in his masterpiece, The Ever-Present Origin, our rational faculties, the mental consciousness structure, wouldn't initially mutate into our collective consciousness until the ancient Greeks, and wouldn't rigidify itself fully until the Enlightenment, which raises the obvious question of, what were we doing before that? Until about 10,000 BC, we lived in accordance with the magical way of doing things described above. However, that would change with the mutation of the mythical consciousness structure. And to be clear, the source of this mutation is an immeasurable, invisible, spiritual source. I will say it confidently. I don't care about rationalists mocking me. You guys are morons. I am above you. I don't care. Gebser and I call it origin, though the term should not be conflated with temporal beginning. Rather, is the amaterial spiritual ground, don't get lost in the spatialization, from which our consciousness structures derive. Origin is the spiritual whole. And the reification of each structure is like an actualization of a part of that whole. With the birth of the mythical structure comes the birth of polar complementarity, the origins of which we will posit later. To help illuminate this idea, we must rely upon Gebser. I apologize, I just ate like a couple chips, and I don't know what's messing with me. Quote, this is quoting Gebser. The mythical structure leads to an emergent awareness of the internal world of the soul. Its symbol is the circle, 2D that is, the age-old symbol for the soul. The individuated point of the magic structure is expanded into an encompassing ring on a two-dimensional surface. It encompasses, balances, and ties together all polarities as the year, in the course of its perpetual cycle of summer and winter, turns back upon itself, as the course of the sun encloses midday and midnight, daylight and darkness, as the orbits of the planets in their rising and setting encompasses visible as well as invisible paths and returns onto itself. So think about it. You can understand this. This is, by the way, if you're a true detective fan, this is where, what's-his-name gets time as a flat circle. He didn't make that up. He got this from mythical structure stuff. Just put clock time aside, put the calendar aside, and what I want you to do is look up at the sky and notice the perpetual cycling of night and day, always closing in on itself, always beginning where it ends, always ending where it begins. Think of... as just expertly outlined, think of the seasons. We start with winter, then we get spring, then summer, then fall, and then what happens? All right? Winter, spring, summer, fall. Winter, spring, summer, fall. Life, death, life. This is polar complementarity. This is as important to myth as space is to rationality. The two-dimensional flat circle, of course, is both still and moving in a perpetual cyclic motion. Actually, let me try to show you that for a second. Because I put some pictures on my article here. Now, look at this perfect circle here, man. My goodness. All right, so we see the circle. It's obviously still, right? It is a still, set circle. Is it, though? Think about it. It's set, it's still, it's not in motion, and yet it is also simultaneously in motion, is it not? It is both still and moving simultaneously. You just have to perceive it properly. Pretty cool, I think. The prototypical symbol for the soul, in truth, is the yin and the yang. It is absolutely the perfect symbol for the soul. I reject that it belongs to the Chinese exclusively, by the way. I understand it's an important part of their culture, but Gebser and I reject this. All these primordial symbols, they don't belong to a particular culture. A particular culture might discover them and make them a part of their culture, but they belong to everyone. They don't belong to anyone. So if there's any Western symbols that you think hit with you, maybe you're non-Western, you don't. They're just as much yours as they are mine. Now, of course, the only interesting thing about the yin and the yang is that we have the 2D flat circle. Obviously, that's very important. We have the white side and we have the black side. But, of course, in the white half, we have a black dot, and in the black, we have a white dot. This solidifies the complementarity. If true, the obvious following question is raised. Is myth itself a manifestation of polar complementarity? For the answer, we turn to Gebser again. Quote, myth is the closing of mouth and eyes. Since it is a silent, inward-directed contemplation, it renders the soul visible so it may be visualized, represented, heard, and made audible. Myth is the representing and making audible, the articulation, the announcement, the report of what has been seen and heard. What in one image is a mute image is In another, a sounding word. What is viewed inwardly, as in a dream, has its conscious emergence in polar complement in poetically shaped utterance. So, in one hand, the circle is still, which is to say, myth is the closing of the mouth and eyes, a silent inward reflection, emphasis on the word silent. The circle still. At the same time, simultaneously, myth is an audible utterance and representation, which is to say the circle is also simultaneously moving. Okay? This is polar complementarity right there. Continuing quoting Gebser. Thus, the word is always a mirror of inner silence, and myth a reflector of soul, which, by the way, will never be able to be measured by rational thought. The blind or unreflective side of the mirror is necessary to produce the visible reflection. Just the way he puts it is just so beautiful. Unquote. It must be noted that this understanding is not a rational deduction, but a mythical circling, as befits the two-dimensional flat circle. That rationality cannot understand this aspect of the world and human condition does not mean that it is myth that is deficient, but rationality. Who the hell's texting? But there is a further expression of the complementarity of myth and the mythical structure, only this time it is to be found in its etymological roots. So we've already discussed one aspect in a way myth itself is a manifestation of polar complementarity. Let's do another one. Quote, obviously we're quoting Gebser. Quote, the corresponding verb for mythos is mytheomai, mytheomai, meaning, quote, or kind of meaning to discourse, talk, speak. Its root, mu, mu, means to sound. But another verb of the same root, myin, ambivalent because of the substitution of a short u, means to close, specifically to close the eyes, the mouth, and wounds. From this root, we have Sanskrit mucus with the long vowel, meaning mute, silent, and Latin mutus, with the same meaning. It recurs in Greek in the word mystes, that's mystes, meaning the consecrated, and mysterion, mysterium, and later during the Christian era, gave the characteristic stamp to the concept of mysticism, speechless contemplation with closed eyes, that is, eyes turned inward, unquote. As Gebser reminds us, quote, we must not make the error of deciding in favor of one or the other of these two basic meanings. Only from a rational standpoint are they contradictory. So, the etymological roots of myth reveal to discourse, talk, speak. But of course, there's another verb of the same root, which means mayan, to close. So, which is to say to close the mouth. So again, this polar complementarity is being expressed. It is not a contradiction. It becomes a contradiction when you frame it as such. So, interesting stuff here. The key to understanding the difference between the magical and mythical structures is to realize that the magical was exclusively driven toward the external, whereas the mythical tries to understand how the external affects the internal. Which is why, by the way, you can tell, this is why Gebser says there's a close affinity between the mythical structure and the integral structure, because that's what we're doing with time as an integrated medium, where time integrates the external and the internal and generates qualities and all this stuff, similar to what we're doing with myth. We're not just focusing on the internal necessarily, but how external events affect the internal, similar to integration. The intangible forces that constitute the world were experienced by magical man who invested them with numinous content, and with mythical man, these forces take on pictorial form and representation. Oh, that was a good line. Let me pat myself on the back. To understand mythology as it was practiced in history, we must conjoin the structures that have been heretofore rendered static and divided from each other by our thought. The point must be emphasized and repeated. What follows is, more or less, devoid of rational thought. I know you guys know that because this isn't Kill Rationalism, but some of these other guys. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be understanding mythology on its own terms, which is to say rational thought doesn't have much to do with anything here. We're understanding mythology as it was practiced, which is to say, almost exclusively in the realm or domain of the magic and mythic structures, without any sort of rational ordering or stepping back or restraint or any of that. And it will be analyzed from that perspective. Let's take a storm as an example. Let's say you, I, and our tribe are walking through an intense storm. Because rationality cannot extract mana from the world yet, The storm is, of course, a magical event, one so powerful that only a god could create. Remember, it's a magical event because everything is pregnant or emanating magical force. Even a blade of grass. Remember, like we outlined, rational thought is what extracts mana. That is not around yet. So pretty much every experience is a numinous experience, even just a blade of grass. The river gods, all this stuff that we just passed by in contemporary, it was all magical, it was all numinous. So including, especially, these powerful natural events like a storm. And then, of course, when you see the storm and you are pre-rationally and automatically attuned to the magical profundity of that event, an image, which is the mythical structure of a god, comes about in the internal, because that is a correspondence to how powerful this event is externally and how powerful it affects you. So when you see the storm, actually, we'll get there. One so powerful that only a god could create. And because I now have an understanding of my internal state, I recognize that this intense storm evokes a corresponding fear and dread that charges the time spent under the supernatural event and offers the moment its distinctive stamp. So we're walking through the desert, you, me, and our tribe, going to go kill people or whatever, spread the good word, go kill the river god. Huge storm, huge storm. It is incredibly powerful, and it overwhelms our rational faculties, which don't even exist. And not only is it a numinous experience, but now we have a little bit of a window into how this affects the internal state. So as we're going through the storm and experientially, emotions start to become activated. Latent potentialities are brought to light. So things like fear, worry, despair, stuff like that. This is the mythical. So magical is external, mythical is how the external affects the internal. These feelings threaten to overwhelm me and my tribe due to our inability to rationally restrain ourselves. The storm is so powerful that it immediately generates an image of a god riding his chariot across the sky, throwing lightning bolts in a fit of rage and pleasure. Though the god of fear and dread is active tonight, and you can tell he's active tonight because I'm feeling dread and anger, or fear, I should say, my men and I muster the courage to traverse the storm and accomplish our goal of transporting medicines that will save our children's lives. That's a much better goal than trying to kill people. We lost a few men, and the event has transformed my soul. So very, very, very quick summary. We go through the storm. It's obviously very powerful, like I said. It evokes fear, and it evokes all these emotions, right? And I recognize, even if rationality isn't quite differentiated yet, I recognize that I am not going to survive if I succumb to this fear. So I power on, and things like courage, other emotions, come up to balance these things. Hello, polar complementarity. Balance these things and allow me to traverse this experience and come out on the other end, one, not dead, and two, with a transformed soul. Okay, so anytime fear is evoked, the god of fear, Phobos, let's say, and I'm just making shit up, is active, creating the event that stokes such an intense potency. Phobos, or Zeus, as I mentioned in the preceding paragraph, then presents itself to man in the form of an encounter, right? So anytime you're fearful, maybe you're going through the storm, or you open a door and some lion is in there, you're fearful, the god of fear, we'll say Phobos, is active in you. It's active, and you can tell because he's the one creating the fear. And of course, this fear is presented originally, we'll return to this, in the form of a direct experiential encounter. Fear is not just some abstract concept. It sure as hell wasn't an abstract concept back then. It was as real as it gets. That's why I said in my subheading that in some ways Zeus, will say the god of fear, is more real than any scientific claim, because the fear that you felt is experienced directly through your automatic functions, your automatic capabilities, the magic structure. That's why it's real. That's why, when I used to live with my mom back in like high school, and I would come home at 2 a.m. and she didn't know I was in the house, and she was doing whatever, and I go, "Oh, hey, Mom," and she goes, "Oh my God, that's not a subjective thing. That's fear. That's felt." The god of fear, Phobos, or Zeus, will say, was present in that moment. The initial presentation, which was originally presented through the vital instincts that channeled our fear in the moment. This encounter is then represented in the form of mythology and, more specifically, symbol. Thus, Phobos comes to represent fear. So we have representation, representative, we have symbol, we have symbolized, we have signifier, we have signified. What does Joseph Campbell... Actually, I'm about to make this point. Excuse me. Phobos, no doubt, is a fictional, mythical, irrational god who does not exist in the real world, Earth, and certainly isn't an active agent in our lives. The magical, mythical man was wrong about that, but he was right about the symbol. Excuse me. And that is what Phobos is, after all, a symbol. And as Joseph Campbell reminds us, never conflates symbol with what is symbolized. You can never, ever do that. And when the rationalists, they look at mythology and they go, they in this very like smug sort of, look at this. You think Zeus, really? You think he was doing it? They're too stupid to see that they've conflated symbol with symbolized. Obviously, Zeus and Phobos are not active, real agents in the world, pulling our master puppets, puppeteering us and pulling our strings. They are symbols, and you have collapsed symbolized into symbol, and you're only working with the symbol. If you're only working with the symbol, then yeah, why would you ever listen to mythology? Because it's just a bunch of irrational nonsense of people who believe that a storm was caused by some god riding a chariot throwing lightning bolts. It's a symbol. It represents fear. It's got... these guys just kill me, dude. These guys kill me. Okay, so the gods are fictional, mythical, and irrational. Okay. What is not fiction... Look, they've flustered me. What is not fictional, mythical, and irrational, however, is the state of fear encountered in moments throughout our lives. That is, what is being symbolized. Zeus, Phobos are not real. They are symbols. What is being symbolized by these symbols is as real as it's going to be. Unless you're seriously going to make the argument to me that you've never experienced fear, joy, pain, suffering. And when I say feel. I mean experience. I mean when you lose your wallet, when you found out that you weren't accepted to your high school or to your college of your dreams, when you were dumped. These are experience. They are not just these sort of subjective overlays where you're in a state of neutral calmness and you go, yeah, I guess I'm kind of sad. No, you're crying in the corner because the love of your life just walked out of the room, and now you're going to go put on some crappy Taylor Swift song. You should be listening to Elliott Smith, by the way. So mythology is the vehicle that allows me and my fellow men to bear the burdens of the world and actualize our spiritual purpose. In our case, I would reflect on the history of my soul's encounter with the storm and put it into words or onto paper. In essence, I would embody the process described by Gebser earlier. First, I would silently reflect inward and then audibly put into picture what has been seen. So, working with our example, I may create a myth in which Phobos runs amok and destroys the lives and existence of anything he touches. Of course, Phobos representing fear. Of course, this is not intended to be a rationally accurate accounting of the empirical world, but a representation of our intimate awareness that fear, left unchecked, can single-handedly destroy the individual or collective. It can burn the spirit and plunge the world into a vortex of darkness and evil. So if I have a myth, right, for the first act or so, first two acts, Phobos is absolutely destroying everything he touches. He is worsening everything. It's like the reverse King Midas, where instead of turning to gold, he just turns to death and destruction and ash, right? So what is the story here? What is trying to be symbolized? Well, it's saying that fear, left unchecked, can completely destroy both the individual and the collective, right? But that didn't happen. So it's possible that Phobos, during the encounter with our storm, could have overwhelmed me, and it could have left me dead because I would be psychologically impotent. I wouldn't be able to survive. I wouldn't be able to meet the incredibly harsh obstacles I'm going to face in the storm. But, as with our example, my men and I, we all traversed the storm. We all made it to the other side, except for a few who unfortunately passed away, and this experience transformed our soul. So Phobos could have destroyed everything, but it didn't. Right? Because I made it through the storm. The point I'm trying to make is this isn't just some fanciful story you make up, like some novel I'm writing or some novel, I don't know, whoever's writing. It's nothing to do with that. It is a history of your own soul. So, actually, I'll just continue my thing. But that didn't happen. Though my men and I did feel fear, we made it through the storm and onto the other side. There must be another element at play here. An element we'll call courage. Courage must have been evoked, and so it will take the form of the god Eirene, E-I-R-E-N-E, I'm just making stuff up, and fight Phobos. So because I made it through the storm, and I did a little history of the internal progression of my own soul during this event, a little accounting of what happened, there must have been another element at play. There must have been another internal potentiality that was invoked or activated by my experience, and that was courage. And I know it was there because I made it through the other side. I apologize if I'm being a little repetitive. So, if, in my mythology, Eirene defeats Phobos, then I can convey to others that when one is experiencing intense fear, only courage can provide the remedy, the only thing that will end the suffering and push one towards a fulfilled life. I'm not making this up. I am historically recording and accounting the movement of my own soul during this particular event. It is as real as it gets. It is wisdom. Mythology is the transmitter of wisdom. Fear is bad. Courage is good. This is the birth of good and evil, or bad, I guess, polar complementarity and qualitative valuations. Phobos is bad. He was fearful. He is fear, and he was negative. He destroyed everything he touched. That's bad. Eirene is good, because Eirene was the god that propelled me to success and saved my life. That is good. Remember the 2D, flat circle, good and evil? Remember light and dark, day and night, the seasons? Hello, good and evil. Yes, this is the origin of polar complementarity and good and evil. I love it. Viewed under this light, this mythology is essential. We all experience moments of intense fear that threaten to subsume us entirely, me included, by the way. Some, unfortunately, succumb to such intensities and either have their lives ruined or ended before it can be ruined. But on the flip side, you get a complementarity and you get a complementarity. The myth of Phobos and Eirene can propel the individual and collective toward unprecedented moral and economic achievement. Anyone who does not take mythology seriously does not take his soul or the soul seriously. And any man who does not take his soul seriously ought not have one. Those who abdicate their spiritual and moral duties are not worthy of their benefits. But continue, rationalists, to profoundly misunderstand mythology and then springboard off that profound misunderstanding to deconstruct all of the beneficial and beautiful aspects of the world and human condition that were built from it, aspects that are necessary to a thriving civilization and social order. Continue to smugly ask, do you really think Jesus turned water into wine? Really? God, I despise these people. As you condescendingly scoff. I always love to laugh. As Andrew Garfield's character told Justin Timberlake's in the film The Social Network, I like standing next to you, Sean. It makes me look so tough. And that is how I feel with Rationalists, my friend. What a great movie, by the way. Though this may be interesting and even insightful, the reader may wonder about the relevance of all this. This all happened before rationality mutated, and we know that times have changed. The problem nowadays isn't that we're not being rational enough, but too rational. Who cares? Those who follow this line are tragically arrogant. There are still plenty of events that we are bound to encounter that will overwhelm our rational faculties. The death of loved ones, a house burning down, financial destitution, the loss of a limb, divorce, and other transformative experiences. I do not say this to be rude, but you are delusional if you think that you could experience the death of a child and cope with it perfectly rationally. Even the thought of it is making me tear up, as it did when I was writing this. Not only is that impossible, it is wholly unadvised. It is okay for the pre-rational and irrational to transform the soul, so long as your rational restraint keeps things in check. Sounds like a good plan, huh? Human beings are constituted of a multifarious structure, each stratum possessing its own validity, and should be respected as such. The rational should not be pitted against the irrational or pre-rational, and vice versa. Logic should not deconstruct myth, but should be animated by it. Myth should not negate logic, but should integrate and direct it. To sacrifice one in favor of the other is to live not as a human being, but as a part of a human being taken for the whole. What is life without love and fear, without passion and intensity, without reason and order? All of these conjoin to create the integral phenomenon that is life on this planet. And if we know anything about this world, it's that meaning is built into its fabric, and that meaning is transmitted through myth. Thank you for reading, and thank you guys for watching. So I hope you guys finally have a little bit more respect for what mythology is. Again, It's all about symbols, right? Don't focus on the symbols. Don't focus on Zeus. Don't focus on what Zeus symbolizes. And once you realize that what these gods symbolize are as real as any, arguably even more real than any rational abstract knowledge, you will have a new respect for it. If you are nervous about giving a presentation, you can recall the myth of Phobos and Irene and say, I'm really fearful of messing up. Well, my favorite myth made it very clear to me that the only thing that can conquer fear is courage. So I must invoke courage in this moment. My mother died. Obviously, that's going to be an incredibly painful time, no doubt about that. And it is a time that's so intense. In many ways, it almost reaches a numinous experience that it might overwhelm you. So that's when you invoke who's the god of? The god of Justin, who is the god of perpetual cycle. And you remember the perpetual cycling between life and death and good and evil and the life pole and the death pole of the soul. And you recognize that this is where the spirit grows. It's not just in the positive moments, but in the negative. So then your family members and your life can rely upon you to plan the funeral, plan the after stuff, be an emotional rock and emotional support to help those who don't have this understanding of myth and they're going to be threatened. This is why myth is important. You evoke these myths when you feel moments of intensity, and they will transmit and offer you wisdom that will simply never come about because of rationality, because all of this wisdom is bound up with immeasurable phenomena, like internal aspects. So hope you guys liked it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I love you guys. Again, look out. Don't worry, I'll get you guys another Gebser video soon. I just had a long day of work, and I didn't quite have in the present moment, time as an intensity, I didn't quite have the qualities of focus necessary to do Gebser, because now we're getting into the meat of it. But expect that Monday or Tuesday, because I've already done the preparation work. But this I don't mind doing, just because I'm already rereading something that I put work into previously. So, love you guys. Please, please, please take mythology seriously. If this inspired you, go take John David Ebert's Intro to Mythology course. That's the one that got me into mythology. It was a complete game changer. Complete game changer. You will have a full understanding of mythology and religion. Religion is the combination of mythology, as explained in this video, and practical matters, right? So the gods won't come down and offer their bountiful whatever or they will only come down if the town or the little tribe here is ordered in a way that he would want to come down. So the myth of the gods and you wanting the gods to come down, now I do concede that they believe them to be literally true, and that's obviously not true. I will concede that. They had to be responsible for cleaning up the neighborhood, for cleaning up the village, because if they don't, God isn't going to want to come down to some dirty-ass village, so they need to do that. So you're very clearly seeing how mythology directly influences, creates and conditions, actions in the external world. So, love you guys. You guys are the best, and I'll see you soon. Love you guys.